Let's get going. I always like to start off with a quote like that, let us go forward together. Winston Churchill there. And the reason that I say that is because, of course, policing very much depends on community interaction, community self-help, and we are genuinely all in this together. And anything we can do to help support each other is really important. Very quickly, the role of the PCC. I know coming up in November it will be 2 years since the election. But the big thrust of this is to have a local agenda so that we don't end up with one size fits all for the whole of the UK when it comes to policing. But my job in this privileged position of being elected is to represent the public interest, ensuring all our policing needs are delivered, and the strategic direction, the priorities, what we need to do in the vicinity and the locality, so we can customise it for what we need here in Suffolk, as opposed to what may happen in Merseyside or Dyfed-Powys or Devon and Cornwall. Overall, PCCs are in charge, the ultimate denominator, if you like, for the budget. We set the precept, that's very, very important, so your level of taxation for the policing precept does come down to the Police Crime Commissioner. And then we hold the Chief Constable to account. A wonderful exercise, as Douglas will no doubt tell you all about in a little while. But it's done in a constructive way. Why do you do certain things? How can we improve this? Are we responding to what the public need and so on? And there are many examples in the first 18 months where we've done that, as we'll come on to in a few minutes. Working with others to prevent and reduce crime. Now that involves all of us as citizens, as businesses. We need to do it together. Working with the voluntary sector, organisations such as Neighbourhood Watch, Farm Watch, very, very important. Local government, district councils, town councils, parish councils and so on. And a very important thing here is the police and crime plan. That is the document, if you like, the aide memoir for the constabulary to deliver up until 2017. It's a 4-year plan, started in April of last year. And this sets out the priorities that we have. All the details are on the website, and if anybody wants any reference to that, please come and take one of my cards if you haven't got one already, should you need to get in touch. Main objectives in that important document: responding to emergencies, well that goes without saying. Solving crime, clearly as taxpayers, as stakeholders, residents, we need to see crime solved as far as we can. No police force in the country solves every single crime, but I am pleased to report that actually the trend is upwards, more emphasis being put on solving crime, and there are priorities in that. Certain issues such as domestic abuse, serious sexual offences, business crime are very much at the top of the agenda. Prevention, of course, is better than cure. It would be a wonderful world if we could prevent crime in the first place, then these guys wouldn't have anything to do. Now that's never going to happen, but one of the ways of keeping the lid on things is for us all to help and support each other, reduce demand. There are many things we could talk about from that, which we can come on to no doubt in questions. Antisocial behaviour, there's been a very, very good result for that in the last year. We're going to have some figures locally from Tristan, but the trend is definitely downwards. That doesn't mean, I can see a shaking head there, that it is obliterated, of course not, nor are we complacent. There will be isolated places, certain vicinities where it isn't good enough. But we need to hear about it, and that's the whole point of a meeting like this, for you to bring forward the issues that you need. Caring for victims and vulnerable people, I think it's fair comment to say that at last we have had a government that has put victims fair and square in the middle of what is happening. I don't think that's happened until now, and that again is not to say everything is perfect, but there's a much greater recognition of what happens. And we've been very lucky in Suffolk. We've received considerable sums of government money to boost victim services. And in October, ladies and gentlemen, Police and Crime Commissioners are responsible for commissioning victim services throughout England and Wales. Consulting with you, very big difference in the old police authority. The last year the police authority barely had 50 letters stroke emails raising questions. The first year we had over 1,000, and this year I think it's going to be considerably more than that as well. There are the contact details. If you want a private one-to-one, one-to-two, whatever you like to call it, public surgeries, you can ring up the office with the contact numbers there and book a half an hour or even an hour slot, depending on what it is, because we need to hear from you. We can't do anything about matters unless you tell us. And we have a very good dialogue with the constabulary, house next door, where we can take things forward and get them resolved. Things do occasionally go wrong, that's absolutely true, but we are there to help and support you and get things dealt with. Consultation with the public, absolutely vital. That is a big difference from where we were before. done a survey on business crime. The biggest survey we did was on speeding, where we had over 2,000 responses, and there has been a change in the way the pattern of speeding enforcement has taken place. Much more in the way responding to what's required in villages and so on. If you've got a particular problem, then please let us know and we'll see what we can do about it. Beforehand, it tended to focus a little bit more on the A14, A12, other roads like that. But we have got to respond to what local communities need. That is a big change, and that is where I can hold Douglas and the team to account on your behalf. That's a key role, and I can certainly tell you it's made a difference. Just down the road from me at Rockford, I live at up at Thwaite. There was enforcement on the A140, you might have read in the East Anglian, and that was at 7 o'clock or so on a Sunday evening, and 16 people got sorted for going through Rockford Street far too fast. So people don't need to think these things aren't done and it's only done during working hours. I suspect 1 or 2 people thought, perhaps I should have been a bit more careful. Then we've had a lot of feedback regarding the proposal for the control room, which, as you know, isn't happening. The combination in Norfolk. We are looking for other ways to save money. That may come up in questions later. Very important we do that. We have these public meetings at least once a year in each district and borough throughout the county, as well as the mobile road shows on tour. Press that again, didn't I? I didn't mean to do that, but never mind, that went back. I'll come on to that in a minute. How do I do that on that one? There we go. Douglas and I have been on tour. Yesterday we were over at Hadley, outside Morrison's, and we were there for 3 hours. Again, people can just call by and ask whatever they like. Very interesting range of questions and so on. And just at the bottom there, the public survey, 92% of people feel safe in Suffolk, which is very creditable. What was even more, I suppose, pleasing was that in mid-Suffolk the figure was even higher. It was 96%, I think I'm remembering correctly. But again, we're not complacent. There's always things that we can do better. This is just a breakdown of the correspondence we've had in the 6-7 month period in 2014 from mid-Suffolk. I think it's fair to say in nearly every place, roads policing, and in that of course we include speeding, that is the top of the list. A variation there. Obviously there was interest in the control room, the proposals for that. Police officer action, that could be about responding to inquiries, it could be about courtesy, there's quite a range of things in there. But all of these are logged, they're all taken seriously, and we have regular discussions with the constabulary on that. Key actions in the last year, dealing with illegal hair coursing. 99% of people who go hair coursing have already got a criminal record. We don't need those people really messing about in Suffolk, so we're geared up to deal with them. That's been very successful this year. We now have 2 rural crime teams, a specials team and a particular officer, Mark Bryant, who concentrates solely on rural crime, properly equipped. We put extra resources to recognise the importance of business for economic crime unit. The A14 summit that we held back in February, we've got far better relations now with the Highways Agency, and you may have seen in the paper this week, whilst there is a small delay for the reduced speed limit on the Orwell crossing, that is because we could get a 60 limit in by the end of this calendar year, but if we wait just 1 or 2 more months, we can get the 50 limit in there. It's all to do with the contractual arrangements, etc., for the highways engineers, followed by the speed cameras for enforcement as soon as permission is granted. My own view is it's better to do it that way rather than have the roadworks coming back twice within a 2-month period and the extra expense and so on of doing that. So very good relationship with them now, and we just need to see the results, of course, and we can hold them to account. Extra police officers, very pleased with the way we've now got a county-wide programme for rolling out for police and cadets. The more youngsters we get involved, the better. Innovative uses of specials and so on. You will have seen that interesting article, I no doubt, in the East Anglian and a sort of 1-hour broadcast about specials on horseback, and I wouldn't want people to go running away with the idea they were never going to be there stopping people speeding, but that is something that the Deputy Chief Constable is very keen on. He's a keen horseman himself, and we do have a big problem with stray horses all over Suffolk. First 6 months, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, 210 incidents. I couldn't believe it when I saw that. So we need to be geared up to deal with that, not only from an animal welfare point of view, public safety, road traffic incidents. It is a bit of an issue, fly grazing and so on. Some research that we've commissioned, and Stuart Agnew, sitting at the front here, is doing the research for us at the university campus, dealing with domestic abuse. Very, very high on the list of priorities that we have. It's an intolerable situation. It's not acceptable at all that on average women who are subjected to domestic abuse experience 35 instances before they report it. We all have a responsibility to face this head on and not tolerate it, and help each other and get people to come forward and support it. We're looking forward to the research being published in the autumn, and that will help shape policing and so on, and many, many people and organisations will use that. We have a priority once a month. Last week, well, it was last week, but last month we were looking at the marine economy. You may say, well, what's that got to do with us in mid-Suffolk? Well, actually, if you look at the logistics business going through mid-Suffolk and so on, ports of Felixstowe, Ipswich, there is a role there. This month it is serious sexual offences, and there will be information coming out about that and what we're doing. Community safety, I won't go through the whole list there, but this is part of the funding we have to support charities, voluntary organisations, all about reducing demand on policing. So it's quite a valuable resource. We've got a budget of about £750,000 on that. We're using the Safer Suffolk Fund, which is being managed for us, final decision taken by ourselves, in order to look at these particular aspects, and it's being run by the Suffolk Foundation. Big range of examples that we support there. And looking ahead, topical today about blue light services. Theresa May made a speech, and that may come up in questions later. We're looking at everything the constabulary spends. It's your money, okay? It comes from taxation, of course. The budget's £124 million a year, so it's a big amount of money. We've got plenty of money. It's a question of what you do with it, not being flippant, what priorities and choices. We have to make choices, can't do everything. So there's a balance to be struck, and that's why these meetings are very, very important. And we will be making announcements, I think, at the end of next month of the sorts of areas we're doing to bridge that financial gap that we've got. One thing I'm sure about is we cannot keep on putting up taxes and putting yet more burden on our youngsters as they leave school and university to pay off our national debt and look after all of us as we get older. And I've mentioned victims commissioning already. So I'll hand straight on to Douglas.
Do you want to do any questions from the council, just if they want you to get a wee?
What time would be? Yes, but that's probably quite a good idea. Yes, Julie, I think you had a question. And then we'll come back to the...
I think most people here know who I am. I'm County Councillor Julia Truelove. I've got a head teacher's voice.
We can't pick you up.
You can't pick you up, I see. And you're taking photographs along. Could I first of all say two things, Tim? Thank you very much for arranging this meeting along with the force. I think it's good for Needham Market and good that they've been recognised as a town, which is significant. Thank you very much. The other point I'd like to make on this is that we all share full support and recognition of the work our PCSO does in Needham Market and the surrounding area. I think you'll all agree. And I am very concerned lest PCSOs are cut down in numbers because the quality of his input is so high and he is needed here. So that's the other point I want to make. Now perhaps I could ask one or two questions, if I may, please. You mention in your list that you do look at serious sexual offences, but I do read that the police generally are prosecuting less than 1 in 3 alleged rape cases. Would you be good enough to tell us what the position here is in Suffolk and how are you dealing with what seems to be a problem? Shall I move to my next question? Yep. Thank you. I know that Rotherham is a very, very long way away, but some others in the audience may have picked up the last comment made by the lady who led the investigation. And her last comment was, "Don't believe it doesn't happen where you live." She went on to say that every town and every village every hamlet might well have serious concerns about what happens to the grooming of young children. She advised all those who were listening to her to be mindful of this. So that is a statement. So my question is, how are the police and you as the Commissioner dealing with this, bearing in mind that it's not the present or the future necessarily, though those two elements are important, but what has already gone, and we haven't yet done enough work to find out what might be happening. Thank you.
Well, thank you for those two very good questions, Julia. I'll give a quick resume from my point of view.
Yes.
One thing I just need to stress, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the operational side of it, that is not the role for a Police and Crime Commissioner. Holding them to account, the operational side, I don't interfere with it because, for obvious reasons, that's down to the constabulary. Serious sexual offences, it is the theme, our priority for this month. Take it very, very seriously indeed. And what I can certainly share with you is that I have given more money in from reserves and so on to the constabulary to do that. They are doing a lot more. In fact, I think they're actually doing a lot better than they were doing 18 months ago. Now, Douglas will be very pleased about that because he wasn't here 18 months ago. But there is a serious point behind that. We've got to make sure it's properly resourced. We've got to raise awareness. We've got to look at the whole of the criminal justice system to make sure that these perpetrators of this heinous crime are dealt with properly, and I think there is a lot of work to do there. We both sit on the Criminal Justice Board. We've got to hold the whole of the system to account. We've got to make sure that we can get the evidence. I've got to make sure they've got the resources to do that. It is a key priority. I do think, for example, we've got the the sexual assault referral clinic in Ipswich. I'm not convinced that we couldn't do with more resources up in the north of the county and over towards Haverhill, and I'm not trying to stereotype Haverhill, of course. But if a woman, or even a girl for that matter, has been assaulted, you go through all the intimate details, which is something we're not very good, and it's not in our culture. You go through that, then if you have to go on an hour's drive and go through it all again and the forensic examination and so on, it can be extremely traumatic. So we've got to do what we can, despite the limitation on resources. We've got to lobby government, we've got to make sure we get the facilities here we need in order to support the constabulary for what they're doing. We do need to look at the criminal justice system. When prosecutions are taken there, it must be very, very dispiriting if the constabulary is not backed up by the rest of the criminal justice system. Now, I can say something like that. These guys can't actually say that as in individual cases, but I can act there as an advocate for them, for all of us. We all have a responsibility to confront these issues, so that's very important. In the legislation, I have to have due regard for safeguarding. Some people say that's rather wet and woolly. I would beg to disagree with that. You get a clever, smart-ass lawyer involved in that, I can assure you that could be quite draconian. So I personally, on your behalf, have to have due regard for that. So things, for example, like the multi-agency safeguarding hub has a responsibility. Sadly, there are some organisations within this county, who will remain nameless, who need to buck their ideas up a bit and make sure they are at these conferences and these systems and take part in the debate. And I will not shirk from naming them and getting them to get themselves organised, should it be necessary. So there's a lot to do there. If you look at Rotherham, just moving on very quickly to the next one, Julia, it would be naive in the extreme if we didn't think things like this happened in Suffolk. Of course it could. It could be happening under all our noses for all we know. I don't want to be alarmist, but we do have to be sensible and look out for each other. And one of the things you've got to do is encourage people to come forward and report things when they have it. And I can assure you, from everything I've seen, there is no way in Suffolk that we don't take these things seriously. And we've got to be prepared to listen to youngsters sometime a bit more. It's certainly something I've probably got to do as well. So things went dreadfully, dreadfully wrong up there. I bet it's not the only example. We had the Bullfinch case in Oxford not long ago. So there's an awful lot there to put right. But that trust and confidence, that community safety, looking out for each other, parents have got a responsibility, friends, relations, whoever it is, doesn't matter. And if you feel things are not being done, for goodness sake, get in touch with us and we'll do what we can to work with the constabulary to put it right. Douglas, I expect you'd like to say a couple of things on that.
A good comprehensive response from Tim. Perhaps just a couple of things I would add. That, of course, these are not unrelated items. A lot of Serious sexual offences comes from domestic abuse, and dysfunctional families do tend to generate some of the victims who then get caught up in child sexual exploitation. So we look at matters in the round. In terms of vulnerability in general, I agree with Tim. I think the constabulary and partners are in a better place. In fact, earlier this year, Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary said that communities in Suffolk could be confident in the services provided to vulnerable, particularly those who were suffering from domestic abuse. With Tim's support, one of the few growth areas that we had this year was the Child Sexual Exploitation Team, which is based in Ipswich. We have already had a prosecution for that, a case which centred around Ipswich with a vulnerable victim brought up from London. That was quite widely reported in the press. One of the key things in our armoury has to be the sharing of information. Tim mentioned something called the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub. It sits in a building we share with the County Council, Landmark House. It's a physical location where agencies open up all their databases, no secrecy, no hiding away, and we can start to spot patterns and trends. Then accepting we've got to do something about it. You've got offenders and you've got victims. We bring a lot to the party when it comes to offenders. Many other agencies bring something to the party when it comes to the victims. So I think we're in a good place in terms of child sexual exploitation. Generally, in terms of serious sexual offences, members of the public tend to be quite quizzical about what they would see as a relatively low prosecution rate. Together with the Home Office, all police forces are now contributing statistics that show the outcomes for all crimes that are recorded. And I think it will start to open up to the public some explanations as to why in some crime categories the prosecution rate is low. Sometimes it can depend upon the ability to gather evidence, sometimes it depends upon the victim's willingness to continue with the prosecution, and certainly within serious sexual offences we can find it difficult to carry victims through to the point of a prosecution in court. But sometimes that's about victim services. A lot of work now being done on victim services. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the Town Council who got a shoot off, was the word I was looking for, who wants to ask a question before we just go on to the rest of it? No?
I'm just here to observe.
Thank you, Mike. Nice to see you again.
Residents concerned.
Good. Right, well, we'll move on then, Douglas, so you better get up again, and that'll be on to you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to the councillors. A quick point, I've only got one slide, so I'm not going to be long. Okay, councillor. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
Cheerio, bye.
Thank you. Just on the broad theme of the Police and Crime Plan, it is a partnership with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, but obviously the Constabulary has a big part to play in delivering this for the County of Suffolk. It's an ambitious plan and it's a broad plan. My own view is I think it's making a difference in some areas where it's of real benefit to the public. A couple of areas where typically constabularies have not focused in on the past. One is rural crime. Tim talked about the dedicated teams that are there. I've been out to see landowners. I know that other chief officers have been out to see landowners. They will tend to say that things are different. We also go to big business meetings as well and look forward to hearing the feedback these days. Lots more to do, but I think we're much more attentive, and the big drops in things like hair coursing, very much evidence of that success. And the other one is business crime generally. It's absolutely true to say that if crime is going to fall, if disorder is going to fall, we have to have a vibrant economy where people have got jobs, training, and something to go for. Together with other businesses, we play a significant part in making a safe environment where people thrive. That attention to business crime, I think, is also genuinely bearing fruit. In fact, the fall in business crime is bigger than the fall in crime generally, which is actually quite significant, notwithstanding that. I want to talk a little bit about emerging trends. The first one being fraud and social media. It's a fantastic thing, isn't it, the internet, but it can be a little bit the blight of our lives. An officer who was retiring today was bemoaning the fact that good criminals no longer have the good grace to saw off a shotgun and go into the local bank. What they do is they sit with a laptop, they find a list of vulnerable people, and then they exploit that list over the internet until such time as they get somebody who will release money or release information. And they'll do that hundreds of times a day. That makes it a big challenge for us to investigate. We're getting scaled up for that, both as a constabulary and as a regional capability, because some of it is very, very specialist indeed. But in terms of speaking to the audience tonight, could I encourage you, if you do use the internet for shopping, for banking, please do visit a site called Action Fraud. That's the new body for collating fraud across the country, but it also gives really good advice, both if you're a member of the individual member of the public and also if you are a business. So Action Fraud, look for that website. I would have spoken about tackling vulnerability, but thankfully the question from the councillor raised quite a bit of that. On top of that question mark over child sexual exploitation, sexual offending generally, I would add in things like offending brought about by alcohol, mental health, and of course dealing and supporting troubled families. We call it family focus within Suffolk, but in essence it's that generational thing which really is coming under the microscope now. Middle of the screen talks about dealing with what matters to our communities. Part of my job is making sure that there is time available for Inspector Pepper and his colleagues, not just to deal with what's in the police and crime plan, but the things that you bring forward as members of the community. So locally, we set priorities over and above what's in the police and crime plan. And on your seats, you've got a sheet. If you feel able to fill that in, we'd be very grateful. It's helping us to think about how we could get better at identifying what matters to you and making sure that those things are addressed. Does it work? Absolutely. Totally agree with Tim. Our approach now to driving standards generally is completely different. That's as a result of public consultation last year, and also the approach to antisocial behaviour, which is seeing a drop, and that's got to be welcome to all of our communities. Last couple of thoughts from me. The first one is about collaboration. We've had a big public debate. Important we came to a resolution on that, but don't take it that collaboration is a bad thing. It's the opposite. It's not the end, it's just a means to an end. It's a means to keep frontline services in Suffolk. Some of the other stuff we can do with our neighbouring forces or we can do with partners. Generally, it's a really good thing, and so far has delivered £24 million worth of savings for Suffolk and Norfolk as our preferred partner. We're doing lots more, fire and rescue, local authorities, third sector, no end of the work that we're doing with other partners. Last point from me is really about the future planning. There is not going to be any more money. We accept that. I think the most dangerous thing is to deny that. I think we have to embrace it. We have to think about transforming our services. The biggest thrust has got to be protecting people and preventing offending. If we have a tsunami of offending, we will fall over because we will just not have the staff nor the partnerships to deal with it. Demand is going to have to keep coming down. I think that's taking us to a very good place with our partners, and also a place where the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner is particularly keen to support us and other partnerships. That's it from me. You really want to hear from your local inspector, so I'll hand over to Tris.
So is it just you, Tristan, or Jenny, you saying?
I think it's going to be just me.
Just you? Right, we'll move
Good
on.
delegation.
Chief Inspector can chip in if she wishes, I think. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of our statistical crime performance. These are obviously reported crime, and I know there's some concern that we don't hear of everything that goes on. But the good news from my perspective is that crime in Mid-Suffolk, and this is based on a 12-month rolling period, is down 18% since this time last year. Which is obviously good news from my perspective, because that then gives us time, frees us up to do other things and work with the community and that sort of thing. So, sort of just to give you a flavour, I'm not going to read them out verbatim, but we've got reductions in violent crime, house burglaries and robbery. Vehicle crime is down quite considerably, as is what we call non-dwelling burglaries. That's sort of your sheds and garages and things like that. Which I know has been quite a concern to people, particularly garden equipment and that sort of thing was getting stolen. But we seem to have managed to drive that down. And the other figure, and again I know the people in the room who might not feel it, but the reduction in reported antisocial behaviour is huge at 31%. So that's good news. So obviously Tim talked about, and the Chief Constable, about sort of courting your local views. We have quarterly meetings in the community which we do publicise, and we sit down with the community and try and come up with some local priorities that should be those that are considered important by the residents. And again, I'm not going to read them out, but there they are. They're the current ones. The next round of meetings comes up at the sort of end of the month, at the beginning of October. So if you've got some issues, please come along to one of our meetings. If you don't want to come, email us. You can contact your SMT via the Force website, or you can phone it in. So there's a number of ways of getting your message through to us, and we'll consider any issues that people wish to raise. So that's that. And then there's just a few headlines here of what we're doing in the area. A year or so ago, I think it was about 18 months, we opened up a Mid-Suffolk Twitter account. That's been very successful. It's a good way of getting the message out, and then people spread that way beyond Suffolk. And we've got some quite interesting followers, but that's up to 1540 when I checked about half an hour ago. So the numbers are creeping up, and there's more and more people getting involved. And anybody with a mobile phone can obviously, or a smartphone, can open up a Twitter account and follow us. We launched Paws on Patrol recently, which is for dog owners to take part in crime reduction, crime prevention, using them as extra eyes and ears. That's been a very successful launch, and there's a lot of people came to an event we had at Stone Market, and we were doing free chipping of dogs and that sort of thing. So anyone who's got a dog and wants to join, then speak to me afterwards, and I can put you in contact with the officer who orchestrates that. Autumn and winter are approaching, which means that heating oil becomes an issue. In the past, at this sort of time of year, people start ordering obviously large amounts of heating oil, and it's not quite such an issue at the moment, but certainly a year or so ago when the oil price was very high, we were getting quite a substantial number of reports of stolen heating oil because it was going in people's cars and things like that, or other people's oil tanks. We are holding an event in October in Mid-Suffolk, specifically around that issue. And again, if you speak to me afterwards, I can give you some details about that, because off the top of my head I can't remember exactly the exact date. But that'll give you some. There'll be a sort of seminar and a sort of basic crime prevention, and there'll be people there who can give you advice on crime reduction around your oil supply and your tank. Again, Tim touched on rural crime. The Specials Rural Crime Team is based in Mid-Suffolk. They have a marked up vehicle, and they go out on patrol on a regular basis into the rural community and work with Farm Watch and what have you to drive down crime in the rural community. And finally, we've got a newly appointed Neighbourhood Watch Liaison Clerk, and he's very enthusiastic and has driven up the number of Neighbourhood Watch schemes. And again, we're constantly looking to involve the public in Neighbourhood Watch, because you, again, are our eyes and ears. And that's just a few things that we're working on at the moment. So I think that's me, really. Sorry, that's fairly brief, but
that's fine. No, that's all we want the questions. There's an interesting point, ladies and gentlemen, about heating oil. Somebody was telling me yesterday that in Suffolk, and in Mid-Suffolk in particular, where we've got over 120 parishes, the proportion of heating that is done through oil tanks is higher than anywhere else in the country. No wonder these vagabonds and scurrilous people come hooning into Suffolk to come and try and pinch our heating oil. So there we go. Right, now it's over to you. Questions? Gotcha. There's a little private joke. Douglas said he'd buy me a pint if I managed to get the word hooning in my subject. Right, I'm going to unplug this because I think I'll keep it quiet. So, who'd like to go first? Derek.
Right, thank you. There are a couple of points. One, I think it's all very well telling us about 19% reduction, 20% reduction. But what does it actually mean? I think what we need to say is, instead of doing percentages, we need to show the public, or anybody else for that matter, that it fell from 400 to 380 or something. And it's much more of a, people understand those sort of things. Percentages is quite meaningless because you don't know what you're starting from. So I think that that's something that police, local authorities and everybody else needs to take on board. I think that's something which is very relevant. So I'm interested to know what you will do about it. The other thing is, Tim, you mentioned the question about Theresa May today and the blue light services. I know that you have wanted for some time to say, well, let's do that. I'd like to know what progress you think we can make in Suffolk, because that to me is so essential to having just one service, one control room, instead of all over the place at the moment. And what do you and Douglas intend doing to make that to come to fruition in Suffolk?
Excellent question. I better put the loudspeaker on. On the data, that's no problem at all, Derek. When we have our accountability and performance panel meetings, you have the percentage and the actual data statistics. We can easily put that right, no problem at all. That's already there on the system, so we'll do that next time. All right. We could do both if that's what people like, but I certainly take your point of that. Right, blue light collaboration and other things. I haven't read Theresa May's text in full, but funny enough, Douglas and I had a brief chat about it earlier. I was delighted to see that she quoted the point that regardless of who wins general elections or anything like that, the country's got far too much debt, it's got to be sorted. I think a lot of people would argue we're overtaxed. I certainly do believe in that. I believe in a low tax, free enterprise economy. So you have the tax base to fund proper, decent, good public services. Now, we spend about £5 billion a year on the public sector in Suffolk, amongst 20 organisations thereabouts, right from HMRC, police, fire, local authorities, etc., health and so on. And I am convinced there is huge scope where you have common functions such as procurement, vehicle management, certainly in training, food, drink, catering, buildings we're doing a lot of work on. If we actually pool resources, we could save a lot of money for the taxpayer and we could actually provide a much better joined up service. If you take the Isle of Man as an example of where you have one control room that does not just blue light integration and amalgamation, but underneath it all you've got dissemination of information. It could be about public transport, roadworks, it could be about certain health warnings, looking after people during bad weather, whatever it happens to be, awareness campaigns for community safety. We've spoken a lot about that, dealing with addiction. Many things. We could join that up so much more effectively together. Douglas mentioned troubled families, family focus. You know, we've got to do more about this. You know, children don't ask to be brought into the world, they are here. And we've jolly well got to start making sure they have a much more positive future. People who are in an advantaged position like myself have perhaps not seen that. You know, I need to open my eyes. But there are too many who get left behind, and a decent civilised society's got to look at that. And what's that got to do with the control room? Well, we know that money is tight. There is a huge opportunity for us to work together. And Theresa May actually stated, and I have seen this part, we were talking about it earlier this afternoon, police reform has got some way to go, but not only police reform, public sector reform. And the way that will work is looking at collaboration between police forces where appropriate. We already collaborate in an Eastern region basis on serious and organised crime. We've got the new National Crime Agency. We've got Felix Stoddart, a conduit for the proceeds of those poisonous people in organised crime. British Transport Police, all these other things come into it. But on top of that, looking at blue light services, let's get going with the fast service first of all. I was really pleased for her to say that because we were disappointed. We went up to talk to DCLG July 2013, just over a year ago. Douglas and I and a couple of others went up. And Brandon Lewis said, well, yes, we'll look at getting legislation for putting fire and rescue and policing together. One of the great things about Suffolk is that our boundaries are coterminous. Not everywhere can say that. Why couldn't we put that together? They didn't bring the legislation forward, so now it looks as though post the next general election, whoever is there, obviously I have my views on that, but we need to get on with this, and both you, Derek, as leader of Mid-Suffolk, and myself, we have a common objective there. We need to do more. We've got to get other people to stand up and say, yes, we will put things together. We've got a good track record on sharing the estate. There's more we can do. I mean, in Mid-Suffolk, obviously the SNT is based in the council office here. Hartonsmere Hospital is another one. We've got shared fire services over at Elmswell and at Debenham. There's more to come. We will look at anything. I think Anybody who thinks there isn't a way forward here, we've got to open our mind, forget about what organisation we actually belong to. I'm not really bothered about that. It's what is best for the public, for our community, what's best for the economy, for business. How do we put things together to make it work? That's the easy bit. The damnably difficult bit is getting politicians, some of whom are remarkably obtuse and stick their head in the sand. They've got to start waking up and smelling the coffee. And that's where we need you, ladies and gentlemen, to hold us to account, including me. We've got to deliver on these things, and you, yeah, and Douglas, yeah. No, all of us, seriously. And that's one of the great things about Suffolk. I know we can do it, and it is so pleasing to hear support from people like the Home Secretary and others. So the challenge has been thrown down. We had a pretty good meeting back in July at Adderstall Park, shaping out what we can do. And I think the way forward, and then I'll shut up and hand over to Douglas, we're going to be successful by getting people on board who want to do it to start with. You're going to get some laggards in one or two districts not very far from here, which I won't name, who somehow have this angst, well, it can't be done. Well, I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, it can be done, and it's got to be done. And that's really where public opinion will help. And those of us in a privileged leader position have actually got to start demonstrating that leadership and bring everybody along with us. And communicating what we're doing is going to be critical. And I do know, if we come up with some good processes, some novel ideas, government, if we go and talk to them, they will help us. We don't want to be waiting around for government to say, here's a pot of money, go and do it. Why don't we go and talk to the Cabinet Office and others and say, right, this is what we'd like to do, you need to come and help us. So that's where I am personally. And I know Douglas has got thoughts and already doing a lot of work to move that forward.
And all credit to Mid-Suffolk and you, Dave, because you are one of the politicians, first of all, very willing to sit down to talk about collaboration, and secondly, a politician very quick to say and get on with it, to give officers that freedom to move quickly. So thank you for that. I suppose there's two things to set out here. First of all, what we're not going to do is unpick the benefits of our existing collaborations. I mentioned the figure of £24 million. If we eradicated the whole of the fire and rescue service in Suffolk, it still wouldn't generate £24 million. So it's important we hang on to the ground that we've seized. I think secondly, it's got to be worth holding a candle to. Within the constabulary, we've got sort of 70, 80 projects running just now, looking to transform the service and save money. Frankly, I can't take on many more than that because I've only got so many people to work with partners in developing those things. But there is benefit to be had. Sometimes it's not always money. Currently myself and Mark Hardingham, together with Tim and Colin Spence, talking about sharing occupational health, health and safety, the cadet scheme, a training facility that Fire and Rescue have got here in this county, which we think could be quite advantageous for us. There are, however, some things that for the time being are off the table. Fire and Rescue in Suffolk have said they are very satisfied with the collaboration they've got with Cambridgeshire around a control room, and the ambulance service regionally have said they will not talk about collaborating with a control room with individual counties. They've got a different direction of travel. So we've set out our case to say, happy to talk about it. People are saying, no, we're not happy to talk about it. So we'll move on to the targets that we can hit, and that's the areas that I've set out.
Good. Lady here. There's a
I don't know where the
microphone.
mic is. I've got quite a loud voice if you can hear. Right, there are three things. They're all quite simple. If you don't take the East Anglian Times, how do you hear about all these meetings and consultations you're talking about? I only heard about this one because I happened to read another parish magazine. I then did put the information around, but that's that. The second thing is there any chance we could have this PowerPoint or whatever you used sent to us so that we could circulate it to others? And the third thing, is there any legal thing about horse riders on the public highway using a mobile telephone?
I'll let Douglas ask that one about I don't know. Yeah. I would imagine there probably is actually, because I think a horse has precedence over any other vehicle on the road. I think, my understanding of that. So I'm sure there are ways of dealing with that. Yeah, as regards how do we get the information out? Well, I can tell you we let every single district councillor know about it. We do try to make sure parish councils and town councils get to hear of it. We could probably do more of that. I know Neighbourhood Watch spread it around in the air. I think I'm right in saying that.
Yeah, we have a parish meeting, we don't have a parish council.
No, well, I mean, one of
So
that is
yeah,
what I
that's
know.
another
So we have to find ways of doing that. Yes, if you don't get the East Anglian, but we do put it in other newspapers. Radio Suffolk are very good at broadcasting it. We have the road shows in each district. We publish them well in advance. I take just about every opportunity to tell people, as does the rest of the team. We put it on the website, of course. That's always a good place to look for it. If you're not sure about that, that is there. And I think it's on both Constabulary website
Yeah, I
and
didn't
ours.
know the website existed, so, you know, that's something I've taken.
Generally speaking, I'm not trying to be, how can I put it? I'm trying to be diplomatic. If there's ever anybody got any doubt, if you don't have access, get someone else to look it up for you. Because one of the problems you've got is the cost of trying to do a mail shot to everybody or every house. So it would be really difficult. One thing perhaps we could try and do, if there's a communication coming round for the council tax demand, which you should all get in each property each year, maybe if we set our dates well in advance, we could put in there, we'll take that forward, and there's no reason why we shouldn't do that actually. So that is a communication that we could probably do. There's already a shot going out, and maybe we could do that to try and make sure everybody knows about it. But yeah, any ideas you've got, if people want short things done for their parish magazine, I expect someone's going to kill me in a minute, do let us know and we can see if we could put something in those. We want to try and up the ante on that and get more people along. So if you've got any ideas of where we could do that, apart from the obvious networks that we do engage with, then please let us know. So I'm sorry if you didn't hear about it, that wasn't intentional, but we'll make sure that Floaton knows all about it next year. We'll make a note of that one. And what was the other, you had one other question, didn't you? Horses we've dealt with, or Douglas?
Yeah, the emailing the PowerPoint.
And the emailing, yeah, no, no reason at all. If you leave us our details, leave us your details, not ours, then we'll get that done for you, no problem. Douglas, the horse and the phone.
Yeah, even the crusty old traffic sergeant I once was, I don't actually know the answer to that. Usually the threshold for anything not a motor vehicle is quite high. For instance, wanton and furious cycling, but it's got to be really extreme. However, with the benefit of Google, my colleague is currently researching that, and before the end of the meeting, we'll give you the answer. I doubt it, but I could be proved wrong.
Horse riding without due care and attention. Who'd like to go next? Any other questions? Yeah, Roy.
Three things. I'm pleased to see the antisocial behaviour has dropped, especially in Needham Market.
Just tap them on the shoulder.
Yeah, the antisocial behaviour has dropped, and I think a lot of it is helped what the community has been doing it, especially with the Stowe Town pastors. I think the ones that can water down a problem before the police get there, and I think that's brilliant. I think they're doing a brilliant job in all our towns, and that the more we can, the better. Two things which I've noticed this last month, being a farming boy, we're getting so many more Barry Wiggins around our little roads, and they've got their ear pieces in, they can't see the big tractors coming, and there's an accident waiting. And I think that's something which we've got somehow there, because there's a lot of these round our little roads. Our tractors are getting bigger and faster. They came past me the other morning when I was escorting a combine. I was slow with all the lights flashing straight at them, and nearly went in. They finished up in the stingnails because there wasn't nowhere for them to go. But I think we've got to get that message over that the countryside's a working place, especially in August, and it isn't just a leisure time. The other thing which I've spoken to with Deputy Dog here, another problem which is coming into is the dogs, pinching of pedigree dogs.
Yeah.
I think that there is all dogs have got to be chipped very soon, and I would like to see that all the police cars have got zappers in them, so they can zap the dogs, because they know, a dog won't lie, but often the person will lie. And I think that's something which I would like to see. Thank you.
Okay, I'll hand on to Douglas in a minute. I'd like to recognise the wonderful work, not just the town pastor, but all volunteers that we've got in Suffolk. That is a fantastic thing about our county, the number of people who get involved in things because they are community minded. Just to reassure you about the town pastors, we used to go through this tedious business of having to look at grants once a year and so on. What we've actually just about moved to, and I think we've got that finalised, I'm going to give them a 3-year deal. So they've got that certainty. They do a huge amount of beneficial work in our towns and market towns right across the county. It does help to diffuse situations. Very good example of reducing demand on policing. And if we do that at the same time as saying to people, look, do go out and enjoy yourself. I mean, I love a pint of fine Suffolk ale or two, illegally of course, or even Passmore cider. You know, we've got some of the most fantastic drink and food industries in the county compared with anywhere else in the country. Douglas may disagree, coming from Scotland, but we have. But seriously, we need people to go enjoy themselves. It's actually quite good for the economy as long as it doesn't get out of hand. And that's where I think there's a message for all of us. Enjoy yourself, but don't act the yob, don't act the lout, sort yourself out. Parents, I've said this before, have got a responsibility, this ghastly habit of preloading where some older teenagers will have half a dozen shots of spirits before they even go out, so they're completely blottoed then. It's not good for them, and it's actually not good for public order and so on. So we have a responsibility as a community, be we parents, relations, grandparents or whatever, or just friends, sort yourself out please, do be a bit more responsible. So alcohol is a problem. Town pastors are a great resource, and we are certainly committed to that over the longer period. Racing around in country lanes, and that's operational. I certainly take your point. And funny enough, somebody mentioned that, it was yesterday, wasn't it? I think, wasn't it someone? I don't know whether you were, when we were at Hadley, I think you were talking to someone else, Douglas. That came up there. So it is a bit of an issue, actually. And the other thing that I get a little bit concerned about is people with their iPlayers and earphones in and so on. You know, it can be quite dangerous if you're not careful. If you're riding a bike and so on, are you really sure what's happening? So again, there are issues there, or pedestrians even, depending on where you are. We need to be aware of that. Dog theft, being a dog lover myself with a mad Springer Spaniel, she is chipped, but I do think we should be moving to the situation where all dogs should be chipped anyway. And if there is a system where we can work at that, I know we're going to be talking about financial resources for that, but maybe that should come into the fee of being of owning a dog and so on, and maybe there's a way forward. I will certainly take that forward with the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners.
Technology is cheap.
Yeah. So we should be able to do that, I would have thought, but we can take it forward. Douglas, any comments from you?
Well, you know, really serious issue, Roy. I mean, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that up until August, we've had as many people killed on Suffolk roads in that period as we had last year for the whole year. Now, sometimes that is a case of extreme bad luck. You know, one day you might miss the lamppost, the next day you don't miss the lamppost, and so it's not an absolute science, but you know, reality is that's well into the mid-20s of people who are no longer with us as a result of serious incidents. Sometimes the car drivers, sometimes the cyclists, quite often motorcyclists, and sometimes they are pedestrians. So a situation we really have to get to grips with. It is an explosion of cyclists as a result of the popularity from the increased coverage of cycling. You know, quite often the 30-somethings, the 40-somethings in the Lycra haven't been on the bike like they haven't been on a motorbike for many, many years. Sometimes riding in packs, and they're not particularly skilled at doing that. My own personal view is we've got a massive piece of education to do. Flip side of the coin, had a gentleman speaking to me at one of the other public events as a cyclist, talking about what he viewed as the appalling behaviour of car drivers, being very intolerant, very aggressive, seemingly putting cyclists at risk. So when you've got the opposing forces like that, my view is that it's education that's got to win through the day, and I think very good work that we can do with districts, boroughs and the county council, as we are already doing with motorcyclists. So thank you for raising the question. We're a real good one.
I'd just like to make one other quick comment before we move on to the next question on this issue of speeding. I sit on the Suffolk Road Safe Board, and we've got a meeting tomorrow. There was that horrendous motorcycle accident a few weeks ago between Ashbockings and part of my district council area going into Otley. That was one of the worst accidents, I'm told by the people from the constabulary who had to clear up, and I mean clear up, sadly, ladies and gentlemen, one of the worst they'd ever seen. Hugely excessive speed, I believe, was one of the main factors there. And I mention this because I'm going to press the county council that we do need to look at a proper route-based strategy for B roads as well as A roads and the speed limits on there. We can't obviously legislate for every dangerous corner. And having lived on the A140 since 1982, some of you remember that used to have variable speed limits all over the place and so on. Now the maximum speed anywhere in Suffolk is 50, and the reduction in serious accidents as well as fatalities has been quite extraordinary. It's almost been eliminated. So the message there is speed can actually kill. There isn't really an excuse for speeding. I'm certainly not saying I'm perfect, but I do, obviously in my role now, I pay a bit much more attention, I'd better say. But I'm saying that not to be flippant, because of course the way you drive with proper care and attention of other road users is really important. Big message there on the education side. And there was an interview done on Radio Suffolk yesterday by Chris Spinks, who's in charge of the roads policing for Suffolk and Norfolk, talking about it. And we've all got a responsibility to point out to people what we can do. We changed the speeding pattern of enforcement. That's important, I mentioned it earlier. So there's a really important message there. And what we don't want at the Road Safe Board meeting is for the County Council to say, well, it's too difficult to alter it. You know, if we're talking about keeping people alive without being over the top on it, it's rather important. And we do not need petty bureaucracy, red tape, EU regulations, or whatever else it happens to be. If we need to sort it out, then we need to get on with it. So I will press very hard for that. And we do have some funding available from the speed awareness courses and so on that we can use in order to try and educate the population. More courses for young drivers and others to try and improve road safety. So that's very much on the agenda, I can assure you. Next question, gentleman over there.
On the road safety issue, thank you. Vehicle lighting. Between 6:30 and 7 this morning, I drove a large vehicle between Bilston and Sudbury. I was horrified at the number of people who had either side lights on only, because they were very foggy then, either side lights or no lights at all. And, okay, but then what? I can see where I'm going, I don't need a light. But surely it's just as important for other people to see them. When they suddenly loom up at you in a lane, you're in a big vehicle, and it's very difficult. Also, cars which do have, vehicles which have headlights on, very, very often, one of the headlights is not working. So,
you say to that?
Good points for enforcement, and if you feel that that's people regularly doing that on a particular route, we can take the details and we can give that some attention. But these are all simple things that we can all do to make the roads safer. And you know, we will always hark on with the public, and we might get boring about it, but you know, there are a very few causes of the most serious accidents that happen. The other one we haven't mentioned yet, apart from on the horses, is mobile phones. It's a big cause of accidents, collisions on our roads, and we can all take the responsibility for that. But we'll perhaps pick up the detail of where you're talking about, see if we can action that.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question? The gentleman at the front here, and then we'll come to the gentleman.
Two things. One is road safety and speed limits. Now, in some villages, they have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Well, you know the area I'm talking about, Tim, which is Hockey Hill in Weatherington.
Yep.
Now, through Brockford Street, we have a 30 zone.
Yep.
I've been picked up there, yes, once. But on Hockey Hill, they speed through there. We had a PSO there one day, and he's fine. They slow up when they see him. But the minute he's gone, they're back to speeding again. Can we be proactive rather than reactive? I think the only sort of real solution is speed bumps. That would be an easy way to do it, I feel, because you can't have a PSO or someone there all the time. And it's happening, whether I've seen it, people come through there 7:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they go like they're clappers out of hell. And the other thing is, you were saying about alcohol abuse. My father kept a public house for 17 years in Norwich.
Yeah.
We only had one incident where someone had to be ejected. The trouble is now, the licensing hours go on too long. It used to be 10:30 till 2:30, 10, and then 7 until 10:30. No problem then, but since the government has said you can open up 24 hours a day, that's what's happening. Anyhow, so if something could be done about the speeding and weathering set, I would be very grateful, because through Brockford Street, where you've got the limit, there's a pathway all the way through, as you know.
Yeah.
And I would think if you stood there 24 hours, you'd see 5 pedestrians, if you're lucky. But through Brockford, through Hockey Hill, you've got back and forward, and some of the biggest offenders are the mothers taking the children to school. So could we please think about that?
Yeah.
Then? Thank you.
Tristan's written that down, and no doubt we'll comment on that. But that is one of the advantages of meeting like this. If you've got particular areas, that we take it forward, and we can look at that. So I can assure that. Just regards the licensing laws, that was about the only thing I ever did agree with Tony Blair originally, with that perhaps a relaxation of the licensing laws might be better, so you can bring people up to be more responsible, etc. I did actually think that might work. Having said that, I think it's not been a good idea, because if you look back for generations, this country has always had a problem with excessive alcohol consumption. Hogarth's Gin Lane, the tax on spirits brought in during World War I to stop the guys in the trenches getting blottoed and so on. So maybe culturally we can't get on with that too well. One thing I would just like to reassure you about, we do put money in from the Community Safety Fund, for example in Ipswich, and we're quite happy to roll this out elsewhere. We've got a taxi marshalling system we do with Ipswich Central and the local authority. We put money in for an accreditation scheme, Best Bar None, whereby you have a kite mark for people who run these establishments to run them properly. I can remember when I was a young man, if someone came into a pub and was pie-eyed, they wouldn't get served. I'm not convinced that happens these days, unfortunately. So publicans, landlords have a responsibility. This accreditation scheme, I think does help, and I think there have been very good results in Ipswich by doing these things and a mixture of things. But we all, again, have a responsibility there, don't we, to say to people, enjoy yourself, but behave yourself. But I do take your point about licensing laws.
Well, could Tris just have a minute on
Yeah.
community speed watch?
Yeah, sure.
How it works and its benefits.
I think I'm on.
Yep.
Yeah, Community Speed Watch, we've got quite a number of schemes in Mid-Suffolk, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with those, are you, sir?
No, I'm not.
No, it's where initially the community come together, we support you, and you set up a speed watch scheme where you have a gun, a speed gun that is, not a real one.
Use the real
And you go out as a community and enforce the speed limit in your local area. We accredit the sites, and the idea is that you then, with our assistance, send letters to the offending people, and if they get a certain amount of letters, that triggers a more robust intervention by police officers actually going out and doing some enforcement. So it informs the process as well, and we can actually then assess whether there is as big a problem as perhaps some people perceive, because sometimes it is a perception issue. People say there's a speeding problem and perhaps there isn't. Quite often the other issue is it's often local people that are actually doing it.
Yes, it is.
What we can also do, if you speak to your local SNT or your PCSO, is we can get what we call an SDR device, speed recording device, the old tubes across the road basically, and just assess the situation and see whether it is as bad as you say. I mean, I'll speak to Sergeant Eves, who is the SNT sergeant for your area, and perhaps get him to make contact if I can get your details afterwards. And you might want to consider whether you'd be prepared to get a scheme going in your area, because that, as I think you said, our problem is if we go along with our kit, we're only good for perhaps half an hour's enforcement, because everybody's then flashing everybody and they know we're there, and it becomes pointless. So we can only do so much. There's a huge demand for us to do it. 127 parishes I've got in Mid-Suffolk, something like that. They all want speed enforcement. We've only got a limited number of officers to get around and do it. So we rely on the public as well to get involved.
The cheapest way would be the speed bumps.
Engineering solutions cost a lot of money. That's the problem. I'm not exactly familiar with where you're saying. It's not actually the A140, is it?
No. Well,
it's weathering set. Yeah. I mean, we have dialogue with the county council around engineering solutions, and their budget has been slashed, and it costs a fortune to do even very minor changes to the road surface and things like that. So I'm not sure that's a runner as things stand at the moment. Unless Tim's prepared to pay for them, of course.
Yeah, well, it's not mine, that's all your money anyway. But no, there are seriously where engineering works can make a difference, but there has to be a pretty good. They have a value assessment, the same as the highways agency. Now there was a gentleman at the back, I think, first. Actually, can we hand it back, because otherwise you're going to go and nobble me. I know. Now, this gentleman was waiting. Then we will work round. Please, sir.
Okay. Obviously, you know my case.
Yes.
Again, this morning it all went wrong. none of your officers, I would make a complaint against to anybody. Without them, I would not be alive today. They have saved me a lot of times. The thing I've got over 90 telephone numbers with people I've tried to phone up for help for my condition, and it's getting worse. I get absolutely nowhere, but your officers have always got a kind word. They're always, I won't say they come around every time, and I do lose it sometimes, and I expect you've heard about those occasions as well, because it really is affecting me. Now the whole of our village, and I did notice today, while the court case was going on, and I was warned not to go, so I didn't, but nothing happened anyway, that they've actually cut the grass in our play area for the children. Now that has been shut for many years, and I would like to thank everybody who's put a little bit of input into it. But now we might be getting some up. I have volunteered to go around and clean it up myself. And also the only people on what you're really saying that really think about what's going on is witness support. They have been absolutely brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
And now Ipswich have shut their community place, so we can't go there anymore. But they still phone me up every Tuesday to see how I am. Can't we just find, I mean, they only want a few £100 and a room.
Well, if you want to come and give us some details...
Yeah, I'll give you it back. I'd just like to say to everybody, all the bad things you say about the place, without them, I wouldn't be here, and I will have no words against any of them.
No.
Okay, cheers.
That's very good. Thank you.
Can I?
Much appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in court today. I mean, Graham was told not to go. We basically, to let everybody know, we have a neighbour from hell, and he's driving us around the twist. We went to court today, and my biggest complaint, the officers have been absolutely fantastic. They collected all the evidence. We hand over CCTVs of this guy doing all sorts of bizarre things. But the biggest thing that lets us down is the CPS. They seem to just, oh, is it another case? Oh, no, sorry today, I forgot to bring that paperwork of his previous convictions. Absolutely, his solicitor walked over the court, absolutely ran it today. Well, we've got a court case coming up in January time, but it just seems to me the CPS do not seem to know what they're doing. It just seems to be the police officer doing everything, gets right to the CPS, crash, the whole lot falls down. And that's my biggest complaint. Don't know what we can do about it, but the CPS
They're phoning me back tomorrow.
Well, it just doesn't seem to go any further than the CPS. I mean, crimes will never be solved if the police do their job and we get to the CPS level and they're thrown out. What is the point in them doing all their work if they never go any further?
Well, that, just a quick answer to that without discussing individual cases, because that's not always appropriate. But generally speaking, that is a frustration. I speak to a lot of people in the constabulary. They get a case prepared and so on. They're always learning lessons, how it might be done better, etc. Of course, nobody's grumbling about that. But I do think there is a serious issue here. On occasions, they do not get the support that they deserve. The huge amount of work that goes in. Yeah. And it really is about time that we stop getting ourselves tangled up in this country with all the niceties and actually support the prosecution of these individuals. At least get it heard and done properly. And this sort of behaviour that you were talking about is completely unacceptable. I think what one can do, and I know the government's very keen to get this sorted out because the waste of time and public resource on this is quite ridiculous. All I can say is that we can look at it locally at the local Criminal Justice Board. We do talk about these things. Can you please improve your efficiency? And the more times we hear about this, the more we can do to support them, because it's in nobody's interest to have this nonsense going on. And I think, again, some people jolly well got to wake up and sort themselves out and be held to account. So that looks like it's another thing to add to the list. But thank you for raising it. We had some people at the back, and then we'll come round this way.
Yeah, thank you very much for letting me talk. I represent Suffolk Cannabis Club. We have about 1,500 members at the moment in Suffolk. 300 of those smoke medicinally. I was wondering if there's anything that the Suffolk Police Authority could do to support them with their choice of medicine. Also, I would ask, there's been a lot of discussion this evening in regards to the effects of alcohol on society. I would ask you, do you believe that the same effects are witnessed with cannabis? You twice this week have been in the very few press, and on the radio you mentioned you believe there may be a link between cannabis use and hard drugs. I asked the 5,000 members we have online. None of them can report after smoking a joint immediately wanting to go out and find heroin or crack. So I hope that goes a little way in relieving the worry you have that people who smoke cannabis immediately want to go and use hard drugs. At the moment, as I said, there's 300 people that we know of in Suffolk that are using cannabis medicinally. They worry all the time that they might have their houses raided, be stopped in the streets if they get caught in possession of it. They worry about having to even get possession of cannabis through the black market. And I was just coming here today to find out if there's anything you believe you could do to help those people.
Right, that's obviously haven't got all evening to discuss that, but thank you for raising that. Yes, I was interviewed on, I think it was on Monday, on Radio Suffolk, and I obviously asked Douglas to comment on that. I think there are two or three things here. It is a Class B drug, and whether one agrees with that or not, that is the reality. There is no way that I would ever sit here and condone people breaking the law. Now, that doesn't mean always the law is 100% right. I certainly accept that. A bit like Mr. Bumble said in Oliver Twist, well, if that's what the law thinks, then the law is a ass. But, yes, I do have concerns about, is the cumulative effect leading on to other things? I don't know. We need to look at the evidence. I am told that is the case. But I think in all of these things, which can be quite emotive, we need to look at the evidence. And I'm certainly not trying to dismiss the problem we have with drunk driving or anything like that at all. It's not in any way acceptable. And therefore, there's considerable amount of resources going to dealing with that. Vast amount of public resources go into dealing with addiction, be it alcohol, drugs, or whatever. We've got a big problem, I think, with legal highs, which are only called legal highs simply because they're not legal. Because they haven't been banned. And there are a plethora of different substances used there. We need to look at the long-term effects. I do understand if people have got rheumatoid arthritis or other conditions like that. I am told, and again, I'm not an expert on this, we need to look at the evidence, that in certain cases there can be relief for pain relief, managed pain relief, and I'm not opposed to that if it's done in the right conditions, properly prescribed, etc. I can understand, I've got empathy with what you're saying about if someone has it prescribed or whatever, and are they guilty, etc. But of course the constabulary have got a difficult balancing act to have there. That is where I think professional judgment does come in. We've also got to be very, very careful that the message we give out to people in society, if you're seen to just turn a blind eye, I think that was a question I was asked by Jenny Kirk, do you think they should turn a blind eye? And I said no, I don't think it's ever appropriate. When the law of the land is whatever it is, you don't turn a blind eye to anything. That's not to say there aren't opportunities for judgment and so on. But it's a complicated problem, and I know you said you'd like to come and see me have a fuller discussion at a surgery. Very happy to do that. We've got to look at this in a measured way. We also need to look at the evidence, and that needs to be categoric in what we're doing before we can move forwards. But it's that legal situation, messaging to the public at large, particularly to young people and so on. You can also argue that in a situation, for example, with alcohol, that I know many people argue is far more serious than that. Now, again, look at the evidence. What is the preferred way to go forwards? You could argue we know more about alcohol, and at least we're dealing with something we know about. Do we want to open it up into other areas? So I'm not giving you a very good answer from giving you a precise answer, but those are all the things that I need to reflect on. Douglas, would you like to add anything to that?
Okay, thank you very much for coming along, but I'm going to say something that you know but needs to be stated in a public meeting, that possession, supply or production of cannabis other than under a Home Office licence is a criminal offence, and the police will deal with that if we encounter it. We have got a range of options. That doesn't always mean that people go to court, and we will consider all of those options in creating a disposal. Now, that's a level of possession, that's not where we invest a significant amount of resources. The Police and Crime Plan says that the priority for the constabulary is in drug trafficking, where people are not holding it for personal possession, they are holding it to then pass it on to other people. Beyond that, there's a complex area of public health. There is certainly one licensed drug available on prescription that can alleviate symptoms of multiple sclerosis. So it's not the smoking of cannabis. It's a licensed drug available in this country. There is production.
That's not available in England. It's available in Wales.
There is production of hemp, which again is done under a Home Office licence for certain products. But I think beyond that, the law is what the law says, and you will find us using our discretion, but only in terms of the resolution of a particular crime, not in terms of whether something is a crime or not, because that's a matter for the law.
Well, I hope that's helpful. And of course, the other thought I have, well, if you legalise one thing, will there then be pressure for the next one, and then where do we stop? But I understand. Thank you for raising it. I think there's just a gentleman there. Then we'll come to the lady. Yeah, Chair Derek. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Derek.
I'm Peter Wright, Clerk and Neighbourhood Watch. I would like to ask you if some advice. Has the Peddlers Act 1871 been repealed yet in favour of the Unfair Trading Regulations 2008? And I think it's completely unrealistic to think that you can have to contact under this regulation the trading standards in a village 10 miles out of Ipswich. And some of these peddlers now, the last one I had, was charging £6 or £7 for the cheapest item, like a tea towel. And if you don't buy one, they get really miffed, very upset. And if you're a peddler, and it hasn't been repealed, the Act, can the peddler's licence be obtained from all police stations? The second question I get asked by my members, and I think there's been an increase, especially in North Suffolk, of non-vulnerable properties being burgled or broken into from the rear, where they can't be seen, and actually stoving in the doors, the bottom panel. We had 2 such cases in our village last year. Perhaps you can give me some advice as to what to tell my members.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's a very direct operational question, and I don't know the Act we're talking about, but I think we're getting the gist. It's about peddling and so on, and
yes.
What perhaps could be done about that, Douglas.
The phrase that is used by trading standards professionals is Nottingham knockers. That's what you're describing, people who typically go door to door, and they are selling some fairly dubious products. They tend to come into an area, blanket it, and then get back out of the area again. Please do report that either to Trading Standards or through 101 into the police service. We will respond. They are definitely committing offences. We're very keen to get hold of them, and it's not something that should be tolerated and encouraged. Even if you don't ring us, please don't buy things from these people. You're just perpetuating something that is not in anybody's interest whatsoever. So hopefully that is that's nice and clear. In terms of a local crime trend, if I perhaps hand over to Inspector Pepper just to see if he's got some advice for people.
Yeah, on the just leading on from your peddler question, the Peddlers Act is still in existence, and you can go to your local police station if they've got some certificates and actually purchase one, which you can then use anywhere in the country. I'm going to switch my thing on, haven't I? There we go. So you can use that peddler certificate if you buy it in Sudbury, for instance, and then go and sell something in the north of England. So they just need one certificate to allow them to sell. The issue is around their behaviour, really, and as the Chief Constable says, if they're offensive or anything like that, that's an offence, and we would, we'd expect a call and we would come along and deal with it.
Yes, we've been asked by our 3 local police and we do actually report.
Good, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Whoever they are.
That's good.
Leading on to your next question, which was about burglary and modus operandi as such, we do get burglars, who come to us because there's sort of rich pickings in the whole of Suffolk. and different burglars will have different ways of getting in, and that's obviously just one modus operandi, as we call it, that you're citing there. But we're working very hard to catch burglars, and our detection rate is the best it's been for some time, and the trend in house burglaries is down as well. I think you said, did you say non-vulnerable premises?
Non-vulnerable premises, yes.
I wasn't quite clear what you meant by that.
Secure premises.
Secure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're obviously an individual
Because
burglar.
quite a lot of premises are broken into because they're vulnerable.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, any premises, if no one's in it, is vulnerable, even if it has an alarm, even if it has CCTV. But they obviously, individual burglars will operate in different ways, and they will assess whether they're prepared to take that risk. All we ask, obviously, we have a crime reduction department that will give advice in ways of making your premises less attractive, should we say, to burglars. So if you would like some advice on that, then feel free to speak afterwards. Okay. Does that help?
Partly. Only in the fact that you're telling me that I'm to tell my members to contact the crime reduction.
Yeah.
So that means all my members in the village, 150 houses should.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we can give some generic advice.
Yeah,
we can give some generic advice about how to protect your house from, and make it less attractive, should we say.
If we link you with Malcolm McKesser, who's the Community Watch Liaison Officer who coordinates the neighbourhood watch schemes, he will give you our crime reduction advice that you can then circulate to your members. So if we take your details at the end, we'll put you in contact with Malcolm, and then he can give you some advice that you can then hand on to all of your members.
Okay.
That's how the scheme works.
Do come and have a word with Jenny and Tristan afterwards. But generally speaking, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the website, there are links there and advice on what we can do about improving home security and the people to contact and so on if you've got any inquiries on that. But thank you for raising it. The lady here again, please.
It's just harking back a bit to speed limits.
Right.
I think things like mums on the school run actually react to the SIDS, particularly the ones that then show your speed dropping. And I think that might be quite a good thing to have for a while in your area. And I think the other thing that is quite good are the 30s, the ones that flash up when you're doing a bit more, just to remind you. The one at Sproughton says thank you, well, we all know it's there, and everybody makes sure they're under 30. It's a bit too late way out of the village there. It would be better if it was facing the other direction and catching the people who've missed the 30 sign. But I think, the red 30s and the SIDS are really good.
I think one of the other things that's quite effective, there are some of these activated signs that flash up with the speed. When it's under 30 or whatever the limit is, then it's green. If it's over that, it goes red. Excuse me. And last year we did invest some money in some mobile signs like that could be taken around to different villages and market towns and so on. They are still there, but I'll make sure I ask what's happened. We need to perhaps publicise that a bit more. I think there was a problem with one because some clever chap went up and stole one. So we had to come back with some special security chains to keep them so that what on earth they thought they were going to do with them, I've absolutely no idea. But I'm afraid that was the case. And that was a joint initiative with ourselves and the county council. But there are a range of things to do, and I do agree things like that are a good idea. Anyone else? Gentleman here.
Good evening. Sorry for our late arrival, but I don't know whether it's already been asked, but there's you said that the crime rate is going down. Can you tell us whether this new way of dealing with crimes by way of a community resolution, if it's dealt with by a community resolution, does it still count as a crime? There's a lady in this room who almost had 2 fingers bitten off by a Rottweiler, and a local policeman came round and investigated it, and it was left to the victim to decide the course of whether it would be community resolution, a friendly talk with the local body, or whether the full force of the law, caution and maybe even prosecution follow. It seemed it seems amazing that would be left in the hands of the victim. I'm just wondering how you decide when you decide rather than the victim.
Yes.
So I take it by your nodding that it still counts as a crime.
It does. If it's a notifiable offence, it goes on to the system. Its disposal is a community resolution, or sometimes it's called restorative justice. It's always for the officer to decide, but in certain categories of offences they will ask the victim what their view is. There are certain things we won't resolve in that way. Things like domestic abuse would always go forward into the criminal justice system. However, the studies of this type of disposal are very, very encouraging. Sometimes they can be up to 3 times more effective in stopping repeat offending than a traditional criminal justice route, and also they tend to derive a higher level of victim satisfaction because it happens really close to the incident and it happens in front of the victim where they can take quite a bit of satisfaction away from that. So from what you're describing, as long as the victim is happy, the officer thinks that's going to stop any offending in the future, nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
Always on the books though.
Just to give a complete picture of what the community resolution panned out was that the officer went round and suggested the lady in the house put a cage around her letterbox.
Yes.
She normally kept the dog locked in the living room, but her daughter had been round,
Yes.
and you guess what happened? She'd left the door open.
Yeah.
So it was resolved that way.
Sounds a good one. Sounds good.
Yes. Anyway, thank you very much.
It's all right. Anybody else, or we, the gentleman there?
You two should be in the Olympics.
Oh, don't worry, they are. Especially in house.
I'll be there till you don't get it back.
I'm a bit concerned about police presence. Not accidents, but yeah. I live outside Needham. I probably come through there 4 times a week and never see anybody walking. I think the blue uniform's a big deterrent. Now, when your patrol cars start a shift, are they patrolling Stonemarket, Newmarket, Ipswich, Felixstowe? Do they get off the A14?
The Inspector will give you the deployment plan for your area.
We have both response officers and local SNT officers. There are a group of officers based in the council offices here, the local SNT, and they will patrol, and they do go on foot in Needham. Hopefully someone might say they've seen the odd officer out and about, but they do patrol on foot.
Well, it's long more since I saw one.
Yeah.
The only time I see a police car on a motorbike through there is when
there ain't any crime though, is there?
when the millionaires are having their yachts delivered to Ipswich.
And as far as, I mean, the response officers that work out of Stowmarket, they don't just stick to the main roads, they will go all over the place.
The other thing is there 2 policemen like you see on the interceptors, 2 to a car?
No, we single crew most of the time, sometimes.
He can't get out and walk about, can he?
Well, they are encouraged to park and walk sometimes when it's appropriate. We have a patrol plan as well that we work to, which obviously revolves around making yourself as visible as you can to the public, because it's you know, what you're saying isn't unique, and I do appreciate that. But if you're driving through, you know, the police officer could have just walked down the road and be around the corner, so that's maybe why you haven't seen them, you know, so they are out and about, I can assure you of that.
I'm old enough, they were on bicycles.
Yeah.
But you walk in that car boot side, and I expect every other lawnmower for side is stolen.
I mean, we do get to the car boot sale as well, as much as we can.
I'll make myself known.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, it does come up. There's the balance between dealing with crime, preventing crime, the physical presence. There are all sorts of things, and it is a balance, I can assure you. I would, and I'm not just defending the constabulary just because I'm standing here, but actually, if you do look at the figures do suggest that the vast majority of people, 92%, Mid-Suffolk 96%, do feel safe. If we had limitless resources, of course, you'd see people all over the place, but we don't. And it is a balance to be struck, there's no doubt about that. For example, in Forest Heath, I do believe they have a system called, is it Track My Beat or something?
Map My Patrol.
Map My Patrol, or something like that. And you can actually look, if you're interested, where individual officers have been, and they go past, well, I never see one. I said, well, yes, well, if you're always out at work, you're not going to see them at 3 o'clock, are you? And of course, sometimes that's when criminals will operate. So it is a balance, but it's about reassurance, being open. We always get this comment, and I can assure you we do whatever is possible to try and deal with that. Does anybody have a final question before we bring it to a close? No? Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for coming. I just want to thank all the constabulary for coming along as well, and the team who've helped arrange all this. I've got a very good team who work with me. I don't like saying for me, we do it all together. I'd also like to thank our friend over here with the camera, obviously ex-BBC, ITV and everything else, John Burns. He is a volunteer, very kindly films our public meetings. It will be on the website next week, on our Police and Crime Commissioner website if you want to look at it. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll let you know in good time when it's on next year. And there's a survey there to fill in. If you'd like to stick it back in the box that says feedback forms, where Kelly and Melissa are, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Good.